He could have helped. He could have helped.
Podría haber ayudado.
She would have understood. She would have understood.
Ella lo habría entendido.
They could have succeeded. They could have succeeded.
Podrían haber tenido éxito.
It would have happened. It would have happened.
Habría sucedido.
We could have achieved. We could have achieved.
Podríamos haberlo logrado.
You would have known. You would have known.
Lo habría sabido.
It could have improved. It could have improved.
Podría haber mejorado.
He would have supported. He would have supported.
Él lo habría apoyado.
She could have learned. She could have learned.
Ella podría haber aprendido.
They would have celebrated. They would have celebrated.
Lo habrían celebrado.
It could have flourished. It could have flourished.
Podría haber florecido.
We would have accomplished. We would have accomplished.
Lo hubiésemos logrado.
You could have discovered. You could have discovered.
Podrías haberlo descubierto.
He would have contributed. He would have contributed.
Él habría contribuido.
She could have excelled. She could have excelled.
Ella podría haber sobresalido.
They would have advanced. They would have advanced.
Lo habrían avanzado.
It could have thrived. It could have thrived.
Podría haber prosperado.
We would have triumphed. We would have triumphed.
Habríamos triunfado.
You could have impressed. You could have impressed.
Podrías haberte impresionado.
He would have inspired. He would have inspired.
Él habría inspirado.
She could have expanded. She could have expanded.
Ella podría haberse expandido.
They would have thrived. They would have thrived.
Habrían prosperado.
It could have developed. It could have developed.
Podría haberse desarrollado.
We would have grown. We would have grown.
Habríamos crecido.
You could have innovated. You could have innovated.
Podrías haber innovado.
He would have guided. He would have guided.
Él lo habría guiado.
She could have surpassed. She could have surpassed.
Ella podría haberla superado.
They could have progressed. They could have progressed.
Podrían haber progresado.
It would have evolved. It would have evolved.
Habría evolucionado.
We would have surpassed. We would have surpassed.
Habríamos superado.
You could have mastered. You could have mastered.
Podrías haberlo dominado.
He would have prospered. He would have prospered.
Habría prosperado.
She could have created. She could have created.
Ella podría haber creado.
They would have flourished. They would have flourished.
Habrían florecido.
It could have blossomed. It could have blossomed.
Podría haber florecido.
We would have excelled. We would have excelled.
Habríamos sobresalido.
You could have influenced. You could have influenced.
Podrías haber influido.
He would have excelled. He would have excelled.
Habría sobresalido.
She could have inspired. She could have inspired.
Ella podría haberse inspirado.
They could have conquered. They could have conquered.
Podrían haber conquistado.
It would have prevailed. It would have prevailed.
Habría prevalecido.
We would have succeeded. We would have succeeded.
Lo hubiéramos logrado.
You could have thrived. You could have thrived.
Podrías haber prosperado.
He would have pioneered. He would have pioneered.
Él habría sido pionero.
She could have triumphed. She could have triumphed.
Ella podría haber triunfado.
They would have soared. They would have soared.
Se habrían disparado.
It could have triumphed. It could have triumphed.
Podría haber triunfado.
We would have advanced. We would have advanced.
Habríamos avanzado.
You could have blossomed. You could have blossomed.
Podrías haber florecido.
He would have succeeded. He would have succeeded.
Lo habría logrado.
She could have pioneered. She could have pioneered.
Ella podría haber sido pionera.
They could have achieved. They could have achieved.
Podrían haberlo logrado.
It would have prospered. It would have prospered.
Habría prosperado.
We would have celebrated. We would have celebrated.
Lo hubiéramos celebrado.
You could have triumphed. You could have triumphed.
Podrías haber triunfado.
He would have blossomed. He would have blossomed.
Habría florecido.
She could have conquered. She could have conquered.
Ella podría haber conquistado.
They would have prospered. They would have prospered.
Habrían prosperado.
It could have influenced. It could have influenced.
Podría haber influido.
We would have surpassed. We would have surpassed.
Habríamos superado.
You could have thrived. You could have thrived.
Podrías haber prosperado.
He would have advanced. He would have advanced.
Él hubiera avanzado.
She could have excelled. She could have excelled.
Ella podría haber sobresalido.
They could have triumphed. They could have triumphed.
Podrían haber triunfado.
It would have progressed. It would have progressed.
Habría progresado.
We would have succeeded. We would have succeeded.
Lo hubiéramos logrado.
You could have surpassed. You could have surpassed.
Podrías haberlo superado.
He would have thrived. He would have thrived.
Habría prosperado.
She could have blossomed. She could have blossomed.
Ella podría haber florecido.
They could have conquered. They could have conquered.
Podrían haber conquistado.
It could have inspired. It could have inspired.
Podría haber inspirado.
We would have prevailed. We would have prevailed.
Habríamos prevalecido.
You could have excelled. You could have excelled.
Podrías haber sobresalido.
He would have excelled. He would have excelled.
Habría sobresalido.
She could have prospered. She could have prospered.
Ella podría haber prosperado.
They could have advanced. They could have advanced.
Podrían haber avanzado.
It would have celebrated. It would have celebrated.
Se hubiera celebrado.
We would have conquered. We would have conquered.
Habríamos conquistado.
You could have progressed. You could have progressed.
Podrías haber progresado.
He would have influenced. He would have influenced.
Él habría influenciado.
She could have triumphed. She could have triumphed.
Ella podría haber triunfado.
They could have prospered. They could have prospered.
Podrían haber prosperado.
It would have developed. It would have developed.
Se habría desarrollado.
We would have thrived. We would have thrived.
Habríamos prosperado.
You could have pioneered. You could have pioneered.
Podrías haber sido pionero.
He would have conquered. He would have conquered.
Él habría conquistado.
She could have excelled. She could have excelled.
Ella podría haber sobresalido.
They could have blossomed. They could have blossomed.
Podrían haber florecido.
It could have triumphed. It could have triumphed.
Podría haber triunfado.
We would have advanced. We would have advanced.
Habríamos avanzado.
You could have excelled. You could have excelled.
Podrías haber sobresalido.
He would have thrived. He would have thrived.
Habría prosperado.
She could have conquered. She could have conquered.
Ella podría haber conquistado.
They could have prospered. They could have prospered.
Podrían haber prosperado.
It would have influenced. It would have influenced.
Habría influido.
We would have triumphed. We would have triumphed.
Habríamos triunfado.
You could have progressed. You could have progressed.
Podrías haber progresado.
He would have advanced. He would have advanced.
Él hubiera avanzado.
She could have prospered. She could have prospered.
Ella podría haber prosperado.
They could have excelled. They could have excelled.
Podrían haber sobresalido.